Welcome to the Cycling in Alignment podcast, an examination of cycling as a practice and dialogue about the integration of sport in right relationship to your life.
Greetings and salutations, Space Monkeys. Before we begin our episode, a brief reminder that this podcast depends on support from the audience. The reason I am able to continue with this project is because of the support of patrons. If you are a member of my audience and you feel I have offered you insight or added value to your cycling journey, please consider a visit to my website, colbypierce.com, where you can make a contribution to the Cycling in Alignment podcast. You can support the show for as little as $8 for a one-time contribution, or choose to subscribe as an ongoing member. Thank you for your consideration. Here's your reminder to think critically, act intuitively, and pedal consciously. Greetings, Space Monkeys. A post-dinner stroll through the neighborhood with some thoughts, talking about, at the risk of kicking a dead horse and lighting it on fire, pushing it off a cliff, grams of carbohydrates. And there are 4 points that come to mind at the moment. First, you can't turn a Ford Fiesta into a Ferrari by putting rocket fuel in the tank. Second, didn't your mother tell you that it's not okay to just eat sugar all the time? This is common sense. The third point is that we learned this lesson with power meters, but relevant numbers are relative numbers, not absolute numbers. And the fourth point that is definitely kicking a dead horse, but is worth repeating apparently, is that more is not always better. That more does not equal better. And that you won't solve a problem by just adding more stuff onto the pile. That by looking for an external solution to an internal problem won't make you win bike races. Okay, let's break them down. So the first point, we don't actually eat grams of carbohydrates or grams of protein or grams of fat. We eat food. We consume food. And by breaking it down into these simple concepts, well, it's rationalistic and reductionistic. And it misses the whole picture. And so when we're talking about someone who races at the World Tour level and trains 12 hours on their easy week and 18 hours or 20 hours on an average week, and perhaps 24 or 28 or 32 hours on a big week, this is an engine that has an extremely high metabolic rate, a very high capacity to ingest fuel and utilize fuel. And the engine is running at a temperature, we might say it idles at a higher temperature than the engine of a normal person. Even someone who rides a good bit, but balances real life with athletic pursuit. And these are two different classes of people. I mean, of course, it's a spectrum, but we can draw a line somewhere down the middle. And we can say that injecting rocket fuel into a Ford Fiesta won't turn it into a Ferrari. What we mean by that is that just increasing the octane of your fuel line won't make your engine run better. I mean, it might a little bit to a certain degree. In particular, if you've been under fueling. And in particular, if you're not respecting the delta between your weekend rides and your weekday rides. So if your weekday rides are 60 minutes or 75 minutes or 90 minutes, and you're burning whatever X amount of calories in those rides or producing X number of kJs, that doesn't mean it converts to, we can't just do math and jam more fuel in there to make the engine run hotter. You have to also do the work. So I think we consistently underestimate the delta in metabolism between a professional rider and an amateur rider. And to that end, there are also changes in the microbiome of a professional rider that allow them to ingest higher quantities of carbohydrate. Whether or not that's optimal is a separate point. And it may be that in some cases it works out really well, and it may be that in many cases it doesn't work at all. But really what I'm saying is you can't just take certain aspects of a pro's life and imprint them on your own or overlay them on your own life and expect to get pro results. It just doesn't work that way. This is simplistic thinking. It's mechanistic thinking. So to take a methodology that a pro uses and apply it directly to your own training philosophy or design, it's just nonsense. It's like doing too much math and not enough big picture, right? Maybe I'm not explaining this concept clearly enough, but someone who ingests 120 grams of carbs an hour in a hard bike race, if we try to get close to that in our own consumption, but our engine just isn't capable of processing that level of fuel or utilizing it, you're just going to gum up the engine. It's the wrong fuel. So when we do that, we run the risk of causing problems. This is Manuel Arjona's argument of reductionistic thinking and applying a specific intervention into a complex system and getting an unintended consequence. i.e., you consume one gel every 15 minutes in the first 2 hours of your hard gravel race, and then at hour 4, you're cramping because your system is overloaded with sugars. This makes no sense. It's really the same problem as someone who read an article in the Wall Street Journal, Men's Health, actually. And they went and did the Boston Marathon. And 10 years ago, it said that runners who finished the Boston Marathon were dehydrated by 6%, and this compromised their performance. So the conclusion was that we should drink way more water. And so the athlete drinks a gallon of water every 60 minutes in a marathon and then becomes hyponatremic, further diluting their low electrolyte levels to the point at which they have serious complications. Hyponatremia is extremely challenging to the human body and can cause death in some instances, or at least really mess you up. So that's point 1. Point 2, didn't your mother tell you that it's not okay to consume insane amounts of sugar? She also instructed you to stand up tall. And while I'll say this with a bit of caution, mom always knows best. Mothers can become stifling, and Pink Floyd sang a whole song about this, which was pretty on point. So I'm not saying that mothers are infallible, nor do they truly always want what's best for their children. And that, I recognize, is a, potentially provocative statement. But you didn't sign up for this podcast to listen to a bunch of mindless drivel or beige philosophy. So there you have it. But what I'm saying is, again, it's common sense to know that consuming 120 grams of sugar per hour, even if you are racing your bike as fast as you can, that doesn't often make sense. And athletes who are successfully consuming that amount of carbohydrate, or 140 or 160 grams, or whatever obtusely large number we have floating around on social media these days, well, just because someone else pulls it off doesn't mean that you can. And also, let's be reminded of the fact that when we do read about this in some post or article or social media piece, that often we get the veneer of the magazine cover with it. That is to say, we get the formula of 140 grams an hour equals victory for rider blah 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 in race such and such. hard, epic, amazing bike racing competition. We don't get, oh, and by the way, they spent the next 12 hours on the toilet. Or their microbiome was wrecked for 3 weeks afterwards. Or what no one knows is what the long-term consequences of this type of diet will have on your GI tract. Your ability to metabolize sugars or fats or proteins. All those macronutrients we talk about so much in the future. What's the long-term impact of this type of diet? See point 1 about mother's wisdom. Just because you're racing your bike for 6 hours and it feels like you're in the pain cave relentlessly and you want nothing more than to find your limits as an athlete, that doesn't give you license to throw all basic health advice out the window. Because I'd like to remind you, health is the underpinning of athletic performance. The order is health first, athletic performance second. There is no athletic performance without a foundation of health. There are moments where you can perform well in bike races at the expense of your health. And perhaps even month to month, or year over year, you can trade those out. But the bill always comes due. To pull a quote from Dr. Strange. No bikes beyond this point. What the hell, Boulder? That's a ridiculous sign. I'm walking on a trail, and that was a trailhead sign. But I'm walking, so I guess technically it's okay. I think that someone who takes license to consume insane amounts of sugar is actually exhibiting the definition of cognitive dissonance. This is sporting mindset. And look, I've been guilty of this 1,000 times in my own career. So I'm not here to say that I'm infallible to this logic. The very culture of sport demands that we question so many of our choices in the name of performance. And we experiment and we try. We see what works. And we see if we can get away with it. And I'm here to tell you, to remind you, to give you a North Star. That while, yes, that makes sense, and we all want to win bike races, well, some of us do. And while we are all here to see if we can smash someone else to bits or find our own best performance. And that's a lovely journey. That's an admirable task you have given yourself. You have drive, you have a dream, you want to be a good bike racer, you want to go fast up the mountain or win the time trial, then that's great. Go do it. And I'm here to tell you that if you make too many choices that ignore the basic prerogative of health, it will come back to bite you in the ass. And I can say that with absolute certainty because I've lived on this planet for 5.4 decades and I've seen it happen over and over again, with very rare exception. The only person that I've ever encountered in my life, not even personally, but at all, who I'm pretty sure has the genetic snip to get away with about 4.5 hours of sleep and still be functional and strong, is Jocko Willink. I've met a lot of people in my life, like a lot. And I'm pretty positive he's the only person I even know of, who actually has that genetic snip. So let's just pretend for a moment that I've met or encountered or gotten to know, 10,000 people in my 5.4 decades on this planet. And that's just a very rough guess. I mean, these are people that I know well enough to sort of make this assessment about them. And so we have a 1 in 10,000 chance based on my highly scientific measurement system. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot more than 1 in 10,000 who think they have that snip, who think they can get away with way less sleep than they actually need. Sorry, man. It's just part of being a human. For all 999,000 of you, no wait, I did the math wrong. 9,999 of you who aren't Jocko Willink, you need to spend 1/3 of your life sleeping. Otherwise, you are trading your future for the present. As Paul Chek would say, don't trade your liver for a car. What he means by that is, don't take a bunch of drugs that will destroy your health so that you can get a contract and then buy a really expensive sports car. Same concept. See what I mean? So this is my reminder that we have to recalibrate with health as the North Star. Then we play sports. If you think you're immune to this, well, prove me wrong. I'm happy to be wrong for the 1 in 10,000 of you. Maybe it's 6 in 10,000. Maybe you're one of those people. Maybe you're one of those people who can eat insane amounts of sugar for years on end and win all kinds of bike races and never have GI issues, never develop prediabetes, not rob your bones of minerals, not have ongoing health challenges of other unknown natures that I can't figure out or haven't learned of. Hello, deer. This deer is about 12 feet away from me right now. He's looking at me like, dude, get back to your podcast. Why are you looking at me? Maybe you're one of those people. And if you are, then Godspeed. Go get some. Go get that sugar. Go smash that Martin, that Amex, that Scratch. Nuke those gels in every training ride. Down those grams of sugar. Keep that glycogen tank filled at all times. Brimmed to the top. But for those of you who are like most humans on Earth, and when I say most, I mean the vast, vast majority, you need a diet that is more balanced. For those of you who are true weekend warriors, which is probably most of the people listening to this podcast, you do need to eat more carbs around longer and harder rides. But that's not license to drop a nuclear bomb of carbohydrates into your gut every time you go riding, especially in refined foods. I mean, one more point on this, second bullet. When we're consuming gels and drink mixes, there's really no more refined food on the planet, just about. There are more toxically refined foods, like those with shit tons of hydrogenated oils and ultra-processed fats and proteins. There are all kinds of protein drinks that are weird bastardizations of really fundamentally what is just the muscle of another animal. There's all kinds of that stuff out there. But just straight gels and sugar, or sugars that are wrapped in clever little phospholipid packages to digest later in your gut, this, I want you to make no mistake about it. This is not health food. This is highly refined food, marketed and wrapped up as performance food. And it is performance food to a limited degree. Your job is to discern. Your job is always to discern everything you hear, including what I say, to critically analyze, to think critically about what you are told, and ask, is it really true? Does this apply to me? And now we're getting somewhere. And maybe it does apply to you. Maybe you're going to try it anyway. That's cool. As long as you're thinking critically, then we're on the right page. So keep going. Point number 3, the third bullet. We have to speak in relative terms. The conversations around grams of carbs are so irritating to me at the moment because it's like people forgot about power meters. And what did we learn about power meters? The first thing you did when you got a power meter was you put it on and you looked at the numbers and you learned that actually what you thought was good pacing was actually dreadful pacing. that you didn't know shit about how hard you were going in the first 5 minutes of a 30-minute effort. You thought you did, but you didn't. You learned that effort and output were not necessarily coupled, not one-to-one. That was the first lesson, probably. Maybe the lesson before that was like, what I'm making power, I'm making numbers. What do these mean? I don't know what this means. But then you began to, hopefully, learn the difference between perceived exertion and power. That is lesson 101 of a power meter, I would argue. For me, it was. And this is a very powerful lesson. And if you were like me, you started to play the what's my power game, where you'd be looking at the deer or the horizon or the road, maybe, and you'd think to yourself, I feel like I'm doing 231 watts. And you'd look down and see how many watts you were doing. This is a really, really important game to play. People who suck at this game, if you suck at this game, you've got work to do, my friend, because we need to be at the point where we can intuit the output at any given moment. And what you'll learn is, over time, you'll figure out that your perceived exertion changes over the duration of an effort and the duration of a ride. And this is as it should be, because that's the whole thing about endurance sports, is it gets harder as you go. But what did we really learn then when we pulled up to the start line and we started talking smack with our buddy? Hey man, what's your threshold? Well, I don't know, you tell me yours. Well, I'll show you yours if you show me mine. Wait, I said that backwards. Somebody else's threshold was 400 watts and yours was 272, but of course you inflated it to 313 to make yourself feel better. And if you had any basic understanding of math and physiology at all, I mean, the most fundamental from the moon level of like, that's a continent, that's an ocean understanding, you would quickly figure out, well, that guy's threshold is 400 watts, but he weighs 24 pounds more than me. So what does that mean? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Well, on a climb, we can convert that to watts per kilo. And even more sophisticated on the flats, we can convert that to watts per gram of drag, which is a lot messier, but still actually relevant and very, very important. And now we have a picture of who's actually faster. We learned that the 112-pound woman whose threshold was only 280 watts might be dropping the living crap out of you on a steep climb because her watts per kilo were higher than yours. So the lesson, of course, is that relative numbers are far more important than absolute numbers, unless we're talking about a raging tailwind, and then it's pretty much just absolute power, because aerodynamics don't play a role, and assuming you're on a flat road, then grade doesn't play a role, and weight doesn't really play that much of a role, so it's just raw power. Then it's absolute watts. Absolute watts for the win. And this discussion is as old as time. I mean, we're talking about like the day after power meters came out, people figured this out. So why are we still having conversations about absolute grams of carbs? This makes no sense at all. We have to think a little deeper, people. If some world tour racer has a threshold of 400 watts and they're making 1,200 kilojoules work an hour, I'm just making up random numbers for the sake of example, and they consume 140 grams of carbs per hour, and your threshold is half of theirs, or maybe 2/3, or your kJs per hour are 2/3 of theirs, why would you ever imagine that you could consume the same number of grams of carbs per hour that they could? I mean, this goes back to point one, but it's just another level to the discussion. What I'm saying is, if you're not burning as many calories or you're not producing as much work as another rider, you shouldn't assume that you can or should or would benefit from the same amount of fuel going into the system. So there's two separate points here. The first point is more about their metabolism running at a higher rate and their gut being trained to handle those carbs. The second point is that their engine is just bigger than yours. It's a V12 instead of a V6. So really the conclusion is the same. If your threshold is half of someone else's, and they're successfully using 140 grams an hour, that would probably mean you're at about 70 grams an hour, plus or minus. And 70 grams an hour is probably what you've already been consuming. In your old, I think I'll have about 1 gel and some mix for every hour of the race, not 1 gel every 15 minutes, plus 100 grams in each bottle, and a cookie at 2 hours or whatever. God forbid you eat a cookie, because that's not efficient. There might be like 3 grams of fiber in that cookie, and that'll slow you down. So there's that. And this all goes to the fourth bullet, which is really about the basic error that athletes tend to make, which is, of course, none other than, well, if some is good, then more is better. And if 90 grams is good, 100 will probably make me go faster. And if I can just jam 110 in there, for sure I'll stay on that guy's wheel. This is just dreadful logic. Again, you can't turn a Pinto into a Lamborghini just by injecting rocket fuel into the tank. It does not work that way. The engine must be bigger. The pistons have to be bored out. I'm not like a car guy, so I can't like break down all the analogies of all the shit that would have to happen to that Pinto engine. But you get the idea. For those of you who are car people, sorry. But I mean, we're all programmed with the same bullshit, the same rhetoric, the same underlying belief systems. Look at your programming is what I'm asking you to do critically. We all have programs running that are installed by other people. Our iOS has been polluted with other people's bullshit. Examples. In grade school, pretty much everyone who is listening to this podcast was told, you need strong bones because you're a growing boy or girl. And the only way to get strong bones is to drink milk, because milk has calcium in it. And it is by far the best source of calcium. So go drink milk. And I'm pretty sure that most of us have figured out that drinking homogenized milk, like a huge glass of it every night, is not the best thing for you. Paul would call homogenized pasteurized milk one of the 4 white devils. That's Paul Check, by the way, one of my teachers I've studied with for a long time. Certainly a controversial person, but that disclaimer aside, I think he's got a lot of wisdom to share. The other white devils, by the way, are, let's guess the next one. Yep, you got it, white sugar. And the other one's white flour, and the other one's table salt. The 4 white devils. That's just one of the programs that are running around in our heads. Another one that's quite common is, if you eat red meat, you will die of a heart attack tomorrow. Oh, we could probably add eggs to that pile too, because eggs contain cholesterol. I mean, the level of nonsense that goes in and out of people's mouths, garbage in, garbage out. We have to think critically. There's more to this system. There is more to this experience of life than we want to acknowledge. And thinking critically is a challenge. I will admit that. Another expression that Paul uses all the time is, the pioneers are the ones with the arrows in their back. And so I dare not call myself any kind of pioneer. I'm simply integrating the teachings of the many people I've studied, walking on the shoulders of giants, as it were. And I'm not here to tell you that if you consume white sugar and drink a glass of milk, you're going to die tomorrow. That's not my point. But I do think that we can do better. And I do think that if you're in the mindset of food is expensive, so I don't want to pay for organic food, or whole foods or healthy foods or local foods, well, I got bad news for you, man. You're going to pay for it no matter what. You can either buy the healthy food now for twice as much or whatever it is, or you can just pay doctors and take prescription meds and be on statins and other drugs for the rest of your life. That sounds super harsh, but that's just my perhaps somewhat simplistic and naive perspective on health. So if we convert grams of carbs to some sort of relative scale, then we have a basis upon which we can have a conversation. And I would suggest we do that by converting it to the number of kJs you burn an hour at maximum, which is still very simplistic, but at least gives us some scaffolding to work from. It gives us some context for the discussion. Instead of just 140 grams an hour, 400 watts. That guy's threshold is 400 watts. Wow, that's great. He weighs 100 kilograms. He's probably a really good flat time trialist and probably climbs like a bag of rocks. Most likely, although not always. I will remind you that Miguel Indurain was a big dude, and yes, he won most of his Tour de France's in time trials, but he certainly managed to hold his own on some climbs. So there's that. Whenever people give me the, oh, I weigh more than 150 pounds, I'll never be a climber discussion, I kind of roll my eyes because that is just another example of less than or victim mindset, to be honest. And I get that that's easy for me to say because I'm not trying to be a pro anymore. I'm like an old crusty dude who's raced all the races and won all the races that I was going to win and lost all the races I was never going to win and didn't go to the Tour de France and did this race and did that race and raced this Olympics and that World Championship and blah, blah, blah. Who cares? So it's easy for me to say that. I acknowledge that my, seemingly unattached Buddhist perspective is also a product of my current place in life, my circumstances. But I think that's also why I make, in some senses, a good teacher, because I have done all those things and I can offer you that perspective. So if you're getting really worked up over your local criterium, I'm not here to tell you that's bad, but I am here to remind you that sport is training for life and bike races are meant to be fun. Go play the game. Just see what happens. At your funeral, no one's going to be like, man, that guy really sucked in that crit. I can't believe she got dropped in that local hill climb where there were 9 other women. Like, Jesus, that was pathetic. This is what our internal dialogue will tell us is going to happen, but that's not how it works. That's not how it works. We are all forgiving of each other's worst athletic performances. So forgiving. And if we're not, that's on the person who can't let go, not on you. Because everyone will have dreadful athletic performances in their adventures. Even all the mighty gods of our sport, they have sucked. They will suck. They will flat. They will crash. They will get bit by dogs. They will get dropped. That's what the sport is here to teach us. And if you get more of that than the other person, or more of that than your buddies, then that is fuel for you to continue to enjoy the sport and have a rich learning experience. Which sounds maybe a little bit like a kitten poster, but look, man, that's what I got. This is coming from a guy who's been dropped so many times. I just said this to one of my athletes today I was talking to. I said, what I've realized is there's always someone better than you, like always. And all the bike races I won in my little, air quotes, career, I won a lot of bike races, actually. You've never heard of the vast majority of them, maybe all of them. But all those wins, whether they were in short track races or cyclocross races or mountain bike races or road races or track races, points races or whatever, all those victories, every single one, were simply me performing at the best level I could on the day. And also all the people who are better than me didn't show up. They weren't there. So I won. I mean, it's not that simple. It's not like they weren't there and then I won. I mean, I had to, work and win the race and do the right things at the right moment and make the least amount of mistakes, or maybe I made the not one mistake at the key moment that allowed me to win when everyone else made a mistake, whatever, however you want to break all that chess down. But the point I'm making is, yeah, you cross the line first and you go, I won. I was the best. But there's a little seed of truth there, which is that, a kernel of truth, which is that there's someone out there, 100%, who just didn't show up, who, if they were there, they would have kicked your ass. You would have won. So another way to say that is, if I went to better bike races my whole career, I never would have won a single bike race. Higher level bike races, we'll say it that way. And if I had raced at lower level races with less depth, my whole entire racing career, I would have won more races. Big fish, little pond, whatever. Just reflections. So now I'm way off the topic of grams of carbs because I got bored with it. But I just would like people to think a little bit about their own belief systems and the true bias we have in our decision-making matrix. When you line up to the start line and you have that more is better maximalist mindset, here's the punchline. So many times in my own racing, I approached decisions with the idea that if I did something a little more, it would give me an edge that would push me through. I approached the decision about nutrition or last minute training or tire pressure or chain lube or whatever, chamois selection or chamois cream selection, or what I put in my pockets, or what I put in my bottles, or what I didn't put in my bottles, but the bottles I didn't carry because I didn't want to carry the weight. Every single decision was approached with this idea of, how can I find an edge? How can I find something that will give me that extra percent or 5% or whatever I imagined I was missing? And on the one hand, this is a paradox, a beautiful paradox of sport. On the one hand, that perspective is brought automatically, sort of inherently. It's a belief system that I was less than, that I was going to the line without something I needed to win or do my best. There were races where I showed up and had the same discussion where I knew there was no chance of winning. Like when I raced the Tour of Georgia, for example. Chances of me winning a stage there were, basically zero. They were non-zero, but they were pretty much zero. So close to zero that we call them zero. But you still have the same thought process, because of course then your line of thought is even darker. It's like, well, how am I going to survive? How am I going to not get dropped? How am I going to, not be by myself for 100K and miss the time cut? Or just get dropped so early I give up and quit. And the paradox is that you go to the line with that thought of, well, what can I pull out of my hat of tricks to give me that extra percent to make me survive? And if you approach that whole equation from a less than mindset, a lack mindset, a scarcity mindset, then you're more likely to make a decision based on fear. And when we make decisions out of fear, they're almost never the right decision. Conversely, when you make a decision based on authority, agency, the chances of that being the correct decision that will serve you are much higher. So The distinction may seem subtle, but it's actually quite important. A decision based on agency is one that is empowered. It's one that assumes that you are going to do the best you can on the day, and that whatever that performance is, you will be satisfied with it because you are there to produce the best performance you can, and you've done everything you can to that point, even though life isn't perfect, even though you didn't train every minute you could, even though your intervals weren't quite as high quality as you thought they should be, even though you missed a ride one day this week because your whatever furnace exploded or your basement flooded or your work meltdown happened. Even in spite of those things, you have come to the line as prepared as you can be. And you're simply going to surrender to the experience of racing and find the perfect balance of relaxation and effort. And that will produce the best ride you can do on that day. And the whole point of you signing up for the race, signing a waiver, pinning on a number, and towing up to the line is to have the experience of all those things coming together into the product of the final placing you will get on that day. And you're okay with that. That's agency. And when you have that perspective, you recognize that agonizing over the grams of carbs, whether it should be 80 or 90 grams in an hour, that shit doesn't matter. There's no 10 grams of carbs difference that's going to get you to perform better or make up for that missing workout. That's not how this works. This is grasping for straws. This is erroneous logic. This is more is better mindset. This is looking for fitness in a bottle. And anytime we look for fitness in a bottle, we've already surrendered. We've already, not in the good way, in the bad way, in the way that accepts that we don't accept our best performance as good enough. We're grasping for something that we don't have. It's like a Labrador scratching at the kitchen door for hours when the family's out to dinner, digging a hole in the corner of a couch because it's obsessing about the missing tennis ball. And we all know inherently that when a dog does this, that this is nature out of balance. This is what we get for breeding dogs for hundreds of years. Inbreeding dogs for hundreds of years. We get dogs with OCD, whack job personalities. Cats too. And it's not correct. For those of you who are maybe breeders of purebreds, you're probably hating on me right now. I'm sure there's one of you out there. So let that analogy be an analogy. It probably doesn't apply literally. Let's take it as a concept. What I'm trying to say is, don't be that obsessive chihuahua that barks for hours, desperately wanting something it will never have. Instead, just own being a chihuahua. That's the title of this podcast, which makes no sense. Anyway, I hope all those thoughts were helpful. Thank you for your patience with my somewhat wandering thoughts. And I do appreciate you listening to the pod. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to my podcast financially. I'm very grateful for that. The effort to produce this show is not without consequence. If you're interested in contributing to the pod, please go to my website, colbypierce.com, and you can make a contribution, a single contribution of any dollar amount you prefer or an ongoing one. And I'm grateful for everyone who takes the time to do this. It tells me that this project is helping you, stimulating thought. Maybe it's cultivating ideas, planting seeds. Maybe it's just pissing you off. Cool. If you have things to say, send me a note. Track me down somewhere. Send me a note on the gram or send me an email or something. I do check Instagram somewhat regularly, but not perfectly regularly. Full disclaimer. So there's all that. As always, think critically, pedal consciously, and act intuitively. Thanks for listening. Today's reading from the Tao. The Tao is infinite, eternal. Why is it eternal? It was never born. Thus, it can never die. Why is it infinite? It has no desires for itself. Thus, it is present for all beings. The Master strays behind. That is why she is ahead. She is detached from all things. That is why she is one with them. Because she has let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled.
Hey everybody, this is Joel Harris, and I'm the editor and producer of the Cycling in Alignment with Colby Purus podcast, and I wanted to talk to you today about another project I have going on. Beyond being the producer of this podcast, I'm also a pro photographer, media consultant, and podcaster on my own. And I've got a new podcast with my business partner, Carrie, called Reticence and Reverie. We cover the full gamut of all things emotional and psychological from a perspective of a couple of introverts just trying to make it in this modern world, just like you. You may find it interesting, honestly. Some episodes we've already done are hustle culture, introversion, seeking purpose, and vulnerability. Lots of other things, too, you might find interesting. If you think it might be something you want to check out, please go to reticenceandreverie.com or check out the QR code on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube, and you can get lots more info on us and the podcast. Or just search Reticence and Reverie on your favorite podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and there's lots more. Just check it out. Just search for us, and I'm sure you'll find us. Thanks again, Colby, and thanks again, listeners. Hope you check it out.
Attention, well dippers. Did you know that I offer a unique service at my studio in Boulder, Colorado? An integrative fitting is the culmination of my experience and understanding that helps an athlete have a deeper insight into their relationship to cycling and movement. This is understood in the context of how the dream, goal, or objective aligns the client's choices and habits. The psyche, the environment, and drive will all influence the current expression of athletic ability. As we understand these factors, we can shape and direct athletic potential. What this means in a practical sense is that we spend about 6 hours working together, including a short or outdoor ride. We will film you on and off the bike, and we will discuss an extensive intake questionnaire. You will leave the fitting with a unique perspective on your function and with actionable pathways to improve your performance. This service was created specifically to help cyclists who have been through various fitting sessions and have had unsuccessful or unsatisfactory results. We dig deeper to find more meaningful outcomes. If you are interested in knowing more about an integrative fitting, please visit my website, colbypierce.com, where you can book an appointment. Epilogue. I want to share a few brief thoughts about the inception of Cycling in Alignment. The purpose of this podcast is for me to get 3.5 decades of hard-fought lessons out of my skull. Some of them through my own research and reading. Some of them I've been taught through mentors and colleagues, other riders, other racers. A lot of it, a massive amount of it, was simply trial and error through my own stubborn methods. And that has amassed a certain amount of experience and knowledge, understanding. And while I think I'm reasonably smart and I know quite a bit of stuff, I want to make it clear that the opinions that I share on this podcast are belief systems built on what I've experienced to this point. And that some of those opinions are pretty strong, but they are also loosely held. That is to say that if I learn more about a topic and have a greater level of clarity or understanding, then my old belief systems will be abandoned and I will now operate under that newfound knowledge. So I'm not here to tell people all the things that I know. I'm here to explain what I've learned to this point. And there's a big difference. Also, that is the intent when I discuss things on the pod with guests. is to learn from them and have a discourse. Because if we can't have a discourse as adults, then we've lost one of the basic tenets of modern society. Even if we disagree, we ought to be able to, in most cases, shake hands and walk away. Because after all, this is sport we're talking about, and while sport is training for life, it's nothing to get too upset over. The purpose of the podcast is to help me help other people, and specifically to help them actualize their highest potential by illuminating a path that enables alignment with their truth, their intent, and their coherence. That's really the end goal. So I'm grateful for your listening. My intent is also not, to be clear, to gain an audience or become popular or gain social status in any way. I don't care about that stuff. That said, if you feel an episode that you have heard will help someone you know, please share it with them. That helps us reach the end goal, which is to help more people. Thank you for listening. I'm grateful for your time and attention. Blessings.